We've all made mistakes. It's only human. Who hasn't accidentally left on the stove before leaving the house? And haven't we all stabbed our neighbor to death because he saw something he shouldn't have? Mistakes like these happen, but should you have to pay the ultimate price of eternal damnation? We don't think so. That's why here at Hell, we are now offering an exclusive deal. Your soul is tainted and unholy, why not sell it to us? In exchange, you will get to walk the earth once more. I'm sure you're thinking, this sounds too good to be true. What's the catch? Well, in return, you will spend the rest of eternity doing the devil's work. But hey, that sure beats the fiery pits that await. Maybe you're here because of that candy bar you stole as a child, or because you weren't honest when your wife asked if she looked fat in that dress. It could be because you're a serial killing clown whose crimes caught up with him on death row. No matter the case, we've got your back, Jack. So, what do you say? Do we have a deal? Just sign right here. Go ahead. You know you want to, Jack. Don't be a coward. What are you scared of, Jack? Sign it, Jack. Sign.
Let me see that contract. You belong to me. No exceptions. Law of Satan. I'm not sure I'm too crazy about the terms of this contract. Maybe my lawyer could poke some holes in this.
We're rolling!
So what are we talking about today? In the early 1970s, an idea began to brew in the mind of a young Tobe Hooper as he attended the University of Texas at Austin, where he worked as an assistant director and documentary cameraman. But at that point, the idea had only begun to manifest, only being made up of certain elements that Tobe knew he wanted. Elements such as an isolated tone and a dark setting in the woods. These ideas would eventually develop into the film we know today, but the defining moment for Tobe was during a trip to a store's busy hardware section. As he laid his eyes on the chainsaw display, he thought of how convenient it would be to simply cut his way through the crowd. That was the moment everything came together, and the killer's trademark weapon was determined. Leatherface and his chainsaw. It's hard to imagine him without it. Like salt without pepper, peanut butter without jelly, innocent bystanders without 48 stab wounds to the chest. You just can't separate some things. What a great title, The Texas Chain Saw Massacre. You immediately think you're going to be getting one of the goriest and sleaziest B-horror movies of all time, but what we get is nothing of the sort. Reminiscing the tone of a documentary, The Texas Chain Saw Massacre sells itself as an event that actually happened as early as its trailer debut.
What happened was true. The Texas Chain Saw Massacre.
It's even on some of the posters. If that wasn't enough, the film opens on a hauntingly monotone narration to really drill into the minds of the audience that what they're about to see is a true story.
The film which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths.
The narration was provided by John Larroquette of Night Court fame. Here's a fun fact you don't see get brought up very often. Apparently, the voice in which John reads the narration is his best impression of Orson Welles as directed by Tobe Hooper. Imagine if they had actually gotten Orson Welles for the part. The narration sets the tone perfectly, putting the viewer in the mindset that the events which are about to transpire are 100% real, making the experience all the more disturbing. Adding to the disturbing nature of the film is the score. Rather than using a typical musical score which accompany most films, the Texas Chain Saw Massacre uses a various mix of disturbing noises, apparently reminiscent of what cattle hear upon entering a slaughterhouse. Man, that's good. That's impressive and creative. Just one of the many ways they went above and beyond for this film. The narration is followed by darkness as that haunting score fades in. Occasionally, the darkness is interrupted by a flash of bright light illuminating a corpse. And let me just say, that camera shutter sound effect is one of the most iconic sounds in horror cinema history. It's in the sequels, it's in the remake, it's even in movies in completely different franchises. A radio news broadcast begins to play, describing the desecration of corpses in a local graveyard.
Grave robbing in Texas is this hour's top news story.
While the camera pans out, we are met with one of the most crude and yet most beautiful shots in the film.
Evidence indicates the robberies have occurred over a period of time.
Yeah, you'll need to get used to that. It's a common theme in this movie. This film is just full of some of the most beautiful shots you'll ever see, of some of the most horrible imagery you can imagine. But hey, good cinematography is good cinematography. The news reporter describes the site as a grisly work of art.
Officers there discovered what appeared to be a grisly work of art.
And yeah, now that I think about it, I think that phrase perfectly sums up this movie. The news continues to be reported over the credit sequence, each story getting worse than the last. If you're wondering what you're looking at there, that's actually stock footage of the sun, which strangely works because this film was shot during a scalding heat wave. I bet someone's already said that about the opening credit sequence, and everyone's gonna call me an asshole for stealing it. After an artistically twisted transition that was actually meant to be a dead dog in the script, we are introduced to our main characters, Fred, Shaggy, Velma, and Daphne. Sorry, I got my vans mixed up. What I meant to say was Kirk, Pam, Sally, Jerry, and Franklin. Franklin and Sally are siblings, and they get along great.
Give me that flashlight!
No, I got to take the flashlight. All right,
I'm gonna go look for him. Give me that flashlight!
We then get this mean-spirited scene in which Franklin falls down a hill.
Franklin!
This time,
And it's terrible to admit this, but it never fails to make me laugh. Our band of characters are on their way to the graveyard to check on the grave of Franklin and Sally's grandfather, to see if it had been tampered with during the grave robbings. On the way, Pam explains what it means for Saturn to be in retrograde, which is just the first of a few clever bits of foreshadowing of the events about to transpire.
The condition of retrogradation is contrary or inharmonious to the regular direction of actual movement in the zodiac, and is in that respect evil. Hence, when malefic planets are in retrograde, and Saturn's malefic, okay, their malefice is increased.
My granddaddy's buried here. Could we find out if anything happened to him?
An alternate take of this scene included John Dugan, who you might know better as Grandpa. We also get more foreshadowing of doom for our characters, though it won't be the last. This time it comes to us in the form of an old drunk who most would be quick to dismiss.
Things happen hereabout they don't tell about. I see things. They say it's just an old man talking. You laugh at an old man. There's them that laughs and knows better.
This movie is surprisingly clever when it doesn't have to be. Hats off to you, movie. Hey, wait a minute. I don't have a hat. Hey, somebody give me a hat! It's about time. Do you know how long I've been waiting? Hats off to you, movie. Once they're finished at the graveyard, the mystery gang then drives by a slaughterhouse, which makes every character wretch except Franklin.
Now they got this big air gun that shoots a bolt into their skull and then retracts it.
Who excitedly explains how the killing process was done in the past versus now. Which sounds surprisingly a lot like the birds and the bees talk I got from my parents.
It's just boom, it goes boom, and then it's just boom, it goes boom, and then it's just boom, it goes boom, and then it's
Franklin, I like me. Please change the subject.
That was a little bit of clever commentary about how people want to have what they like, but they don't want to know what goes into it. Tobe Hooper actually stopped eating meat during development of this movie, but that might just be because production was disgusting.
What they didn't think about was after day, and under the lights, that chicken started to rot.
That room was probably 120 degrees. I mean, I think that's a conservative estimate of the temperature.
Boy, was it hot, and the meat got rotten. I never did get ill physically, where a lot of people did. They run outside.
I went out and threw up.
Along their way, our characters come across a hitchhiker.
Hitchhiker?
Should we pick him up?
Who they claim will bake in the Texas sun if they don't help. A good old-fashioned example of no good deed going unpunished.
Oh, he's weird looking. No!
Did you notice how that clip just kind of cut off? The conversation continued whether or not the audience was watching. This style of filmmaking really hopes you feel like you're watching a documentary.
Well, I think we just picked up Dracula.
The hitchhiker explains that he and his whole family used to work at that slaughterhouse.
I was at the slaughterhouse. Hey, my brother worked there. My grandfather, too. My family's always been in me. The whole family of Draculas.
Intrigued, Franklin asks if they use the cattle gun.
Hey, man, did you go in that slaughter room or whatever they call it? The place where they shoot the cattle in the head with that big air gun thing. Oh.
This offends the hitchhiker, who explains that the gun puts people out of the job.
That gun's no good. New way people put out of jobs.
This movie just made a valid point about how society advances at the expense of people's livelihoods. I would like to remind everyone that the name of this movie is the Texas Chain Saw Massacre. Kudos to actor Ed Neal, who played the hitchhiker with a realistic approach to a crazy person without becoming too over the top.
Hitchies! They take the head and they boil it, except for the tongue. And they scrape all the flesh away from the bone.
By the way, the original title for this movie was Head Cheese. Imagine an alternate reality where I'm talking about cult classic horror film Head Cheese. Well, what I talk about afterwards, the babysitter murders?
You'd probably like it if you didn't know what was in it.
No, I wouldn't, and
I don't know about that. I've seen Head Cheese. I think I'll stick to my dino nuggets. The hitchhiker snatches Franklin's knife and, well, does something to himself that I probably can't show on YouTube. Look at Franklin's f***ing face. And what's this the hitchhiker has? A camera? Uh-oh. I'm sorry. I think the camera should have sounded like this.
It's a nice picture. Hey, you can pay me now. Huh?
After no one expresses any interest in buying the photograph, the hitchhiker proceeds to burn the photo to a crisp before attacking Franklin. Geez, way to overreact. After they finally come to their senses, the decision is made to kick the hitchhiker out of the van. After which Pam proceeds to read Franklin's horoscope, which, guess what, warns of doom.
Hey, listen to Franklin's horoscope. Long-range plans and upsetting persons around you could make this a disturbing and unpredictable day. The events in the world are not doing much either to cheer one up.
In need of gas, the group makes their way to a nearby gas station. The owner walks out of the shop and we'll call him the cook. For reasons.
I got no gas.
You're out of gas?
My tank's empty. Transport won't be here until late this afternoon.
Hey, you know where the old Franklin place is?
The cook proceeds to warn the group not to fool around on anyone else's property, as some people won't take very kindly to it.
Well, now look, you boys don't want to go mess around no old house. But those things is dangerous. You're liable to get hurt.
But they explain to the man that it's their father's property.
Oh, my father owns it.
And that's your daddy's place, huh?
After suggesting that they stick around for some barbecue while they wait for the transport to bring gas, the cook continues to insist that they shouldn't go to some outhouse.
Them girls now, they don't want to go messing around no old house.
For one reason or another, the cook really doesn't want them to go. When they finally arrive at the old Franklin place, our characters continue their conversations even though the camera is too far away to hear. This is another perfect example of what I was talking about earlier. Everyone makes their way into the house, leaving poor Franklin behind.
Sorry!
Everyone says Franklin is annoying in this movie, but I think the guy's a riot. Something about seeing this poor bastard down on his luck never fails to make me laugh.
Come on, Franklin! It's gonna be a fun trip! If I have any more fun today, I don't think I'm gonna be able to take it. Hey, Franklin.
Didn't you say there's a swimming hole around here?
There used to be a trail down between those two old sheds.
And what's this Franklin finds?
Sally!
The missile bones! Franklin, it looks like your luck is turning around. Quick, make a wish! Pam and Kirk go down to the swimming hole just to find that it dried up in the Texas heat. That's when their attention is turned to a nearby farmhouse powered by a generator. They figure that maybe the owners could spare some gas for their trip back home. On their way to the farmhouse, they find a bunch of vehicles hidden away nearby. Totally not suspicious at all. They make their way up to the farmhouse to see if anyone is home when a tooth falls near Kirk.
Got something for you.
What an asshole! He's my favorite character. Oh, man. Well, that's on you for walking into somebody's home like that. If you had just listened to the nice innocent man from the gas station, you could have avoided this entire situation. Pam begins to worry as Kirk has been gone for a while.
Kirk?
Nice. You know, that shot was completely incidental. They weren't sure how to get the camera past the swing, so their solution was to take it under. It made for a great shot. Pam wanders into the farmhouse where she navigates her way into a room filled with bones and a chicken. Aw, look at the little guy. I'm gonna name him Pecker. And he's my Pecker and you can't have him. Look at all the nasty stuff in that room. It's genuinely disgusting. The worst part is that those bones are real. It was a lot cheaper back then to use actual bones than to buy props. Rightfully disturbed, Pam runs out of the room and comes face to face with Leatherface, who is wearing someone else's face. Pam tries to run away, but she doesn't get far. I don't know about you guys, but this movie has me hooked. Tough crowd. Holy crap, it's him! The Texas Chain Saw Massacre! The chainsaw used in the original film is so perfect. It's not some exaggerated movie villain weapon the way it became in the sequels and remakes, but don't worry, we'll get to those. The chainsaw looks like something someone would actually use in real life, and it was. The chainsaw used in the film was borrowed and returned to its owner after filming. The chainsaw model in question is actually debated within the film's fandom. Some people believe the chainsaw is a Poland 245A, while other people are simply wrong. Meanwhile, back at the van, the remaining characters speculate where Kirk and Pam have gone. Jerry decides to go out and search for them.
Can I go too?
I think you better stay here.
No, Sally, it's best I go alone. You have to survive until the end of the movie. Walking in like he owns the place, where everyone thinks it's a good idea to just walk inside, Jerry hears a noise coming from the freezer. he opens it up to find Pam's body, which bolts up from shock before collapsing lifeless again. That little scene you just saw, of Pam's body popping up in shock for a second? Well, apparently it was enough for Terry McMinn, aka the actress who played Pam, to write an entire fanfiction about how Pam secretly survived. Yeah. This weirdo in the comments, who definitely isn't me, pointed out that her face was worn by Leatherface later in the movie. Terry responded by simply stating that he was wrong. Jerry gets bonked on the head and meets his completely preventable end, just like Pam and Kirk. I'm not too familiar with Texas law in the 70s, but I think you could argue that each kill in this movie so far is legally justified as self-defense. Now everybody go ahead and comment about how wrong I'm about that, you f***ing losers. Right after this, we get our first up-close and personal look at Leatherface, played by Gunnar Hansen. Gunnar studied for the role by sneaking into a home for the mentally impaired and secretly lived among them undetected for some time. He based Leatherface's noises and mannerisms on what he observed in his time there. The skin masks that Leatherface wears throughout the movie are unique compared to the others in the Chainsaw franchise. The concept was never that Leatherface simply cut faces off and wore them, but instead the idea was that they were cured the same way we cure leather. The dried skin effect was created by Bob Burns, who achieved this look by creating a formula consisting of liquid latex and fiberglass. Leatherface is not presented like your typical movie villain. He's shown to be scared, worried, and confused about why people keep walking into his house. You can't help but feel a little bad for the big guy. Oh, it's okay, Leatherface. I'll be your friend. The sun has gone down with no sign of Jerry or the others.
Franklin, let me see the flashlight. I'm gonna go look for him. You don't have to go.
So Sally and Franklin decide to go looking for them, but not before a little disagreement.
Look, what if they came back and we weren't here?
Franklin, give me that flashlight!
No, I got to take the flashlight. All right,
I'm gonna go look for him. Give me that flashlight!
I'll go with you. All right. No, Sally, come on. I'll go with you.
Allegedly, the scene wasn't even scripted. The actors just stayed at each other's throats throughout filming, which led to this interaction being ad-libbed on the spot. Sally and Franklin make their way through the woods when they suddenly run into Leatherface, who miraculously starts his chainsaw without having to crank it. Oh no, Franklin! Run, Sally, run! Don't let Leatherface get you or you're gonna have to write a fanfiction about how you actually survived. Wow, Leatherface, you might actually get her if you stopped cutting every tree you see. Of course, Sally runs into the farmhouse because everyone in this movie thinks it's public property. She even locks poor old Leatherface out of his own home, making him have to cut the door down. Sally runs upstairs where she meets Grandpa and Grandma and their pet cat dog thing, which she rudely knocks over on her way out. Not seeing another way out, Sally jumps out of the window and runs back to the gas station. But it looks like the cook might not be so friendly after all.
What are you doing?
You don't need to worry.
No!
No, you just cooperate, young lady, and we'll have no trouble.
The man takes Sally hostage, tying her up and putting her in his truck.
I hope you're not too uncomfortable down there.
Hey, you can't say he didn't warn them to stay away. On their way back to the farmhouse, the cook meets up with the hitchhiker. He gets out of his truck and starts beating him up, scolding him for what he did in the graveyard, confirming our suspicions.
No, they didn't see me. They don't know nothing. I told you to stay away from that graveyard.
I'm sure at this point that you've put together that the cook, the hitchhiker, and Leatherface are all part of the same dysfunctional family. Back in the farmhouse, we see Leatherface is now dressed as an old lady. You see, Leatherface takes on the personality of whatever face he wears. He probably dressed as an old lady to present himself as more sympathetic because he knew he would be in trouble when his family got home.
You damn fool! You ruined the door! Hey, Leatherface! Give me a hand with Grandpa!
If you can believe it, John Dugan was only 19 when he played the role of Grandpa. The makeup for Grandpa wasn't done by a special effects artist, but instead a plastic surgeon. Dr. W.E. Barnes, M.D. was brought on for the project, instructed to accurately construct the face of a man over 100 years old, so that's exactly what he did. Similarly, Leatherface's teeth were actually made by Gunnar Hansen's dentist. Once they bring Grandpa down the stairs, they place him at the end of the table before bringing Sally over to give Grandpa a taste of blood. I heard they actually had to cut her finger for that scene for real because they couldn't get the blood pump to work. They just don't make movies like they used to. The sight of her own blood being enjoyed by a 100-year-old man is too much for Sally to take, causing her to pass out. When Sally eventually wakes up, she finds herself tied down to a chair at the opposite end of the table, and I just wanted to take a moment to point out all that messed up decor in the house. Some of it you might not even notice.
We were just having fun. You think this is a party?
Hey, wait, what's that? Pecker, no! You irredeemable monsters! I was willing to look past everything else you did, but now you've gone too far! We see that Leatherface is now wearing the face of a woman with makeup crudely smeared all over. Leatherface is adorable, regardless of how horrifying he is. Sally decides to be the world's worst dinner guest. Jesus Christ, Sally, your entitled friends traumatize poor Leatherface, and his family still takes the time out of their day to cook you a special dinner. Ungrateful. Sally is screaming, the family is screaming, it's just one big insane nightmare. It really makes the viewer feel claustrophobic. This was Tobe Hooper's satirical take on the average American family. Did you know that he deemed the film a dark comedy and pushed for a PG rating? The cook tries to take control of the situation, but even he finds himself taken over by the madness. The cook is by far the most interesting character in this entire film.
You're just a cook! Shut your mouth! You don't understand. I just can't take no pleasure in killing. Just some things you gotta do. Don't mean you have to like it.
Constantly switching back and forth between shame for what they're doing
Get on with it. I won't have this.
and seemingly enjoying it. Look at this scene, for instance. The cook is clearly enjoying himself, but then he kind of looks off to the side as his smile fades. You don't know what's going on inside of his head. The movie never tells you. It is up to interpretation. Things like that are never heavily focused on. In fact, this family's entire story is only ever implied. We only know as much about them as the main characters do, and that's absolutely brilliant. The less you know about them, the scarier they are. They're incredibly fleshed out, but so much is left unsaid about them. Boy, I sure hope none of the later installments in this franchise mess that up. More insanity ensues, and the tension rises before they finally decide it's time to finish the job, letting Grandpa be the one to do it, as he was the best killer there ever was.
Oh, Grandpa's the best killer there ever was. I never took more than one lick, they say.
I don't know about that. He barely seems alive, but I'll take your word for it. Grandpa can barely hold the hammer, and Sally's suffering is only prolonged.
Get her!
The hitchhiker becomes frustrated,
Get her, Grandpa! Give me the hammer!
deciding to take over, which allows for Sally to make her daring escape. Run, Sally, run! A suspenseful chase scene ensues. The hitchhiker and Leatherface are right on Sally's tail. They chase her into the middle of a road where an incoming semi-truck honks for them to get out of the way. Sally moves just in time, but the hitchhiker isn't so lucky. The truck is brought to a stop, and the driver jumps out to attempt to help Sally, landing a clean hit right in Leatherface's face, knocking him on his leather ass. Ouch! Did you know the pain in that scene was real? A metal plate was used to protect Gunner's leg in that scene, but when the chainsaw came into contact with it, the metal heated up and burned Gunner's leg. That scream of pain was 100% real. So is that limping. If my memory serves me well, that limping wasn't even scripted. Gunner was just genuinely injured and struggling to continue. Another truck comes along to pick up Sally while the semi-truck driver keeps running away. You know, they never did show what happened to that semi-truck driver. Legends say he's still running to this day. Sally gets into the back of the truck and just barely misses Leatherface. The truck begins to drive away as Leatherface chases closely behind before accepting defeat. Sally screaming bloody murder all the while before shifting into uncontrollable, insane laughter. The last shot of the film shows an enraged Leatherface swinging his chainsaw through the air in frustration as the sun begins to rise behind him, making for one of the most beautiful shots in the history of horror cinema before cutting to black. Wow! And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you end a horror movie. The Texas Chain Saw Massacre is one of the greatest horror films of all time, if not the greatest. I can't recall another horror movie that feels as real as this one. You don't see characters, you see people. People who are put through hell, and you are but an onlooker, unable to help. Everything about this movie is perfect, and it holds up surprisingly well considering its age. Definitely benefited by its documentary feel, aging the movie like fine wine. In my opinion, the Texas Chain Saw Massacre is the golden standard for the horror genre, and I think that just about wraps up this review. So without further ado...
Final thoughts!
What? Didn't I just give my final thoughts?
Read this, clown.
What's this? Is what I said not good enough?
Just read the script.
But I think what I said should have been...
Shut the fuck up and read the script!
The Texas Chain Saw Massacre TM is the greatest movie ever made. 10 out of 10, certified fresh. Remember, horror fans, to check out officially licensed The Texas Chain Saw Massacre TM merchandise at approved stores. And don't forget to buy the Texas Chain Saw Massacre TM on brand new 4K and Blu-ray. Don't miss out on the limited edition Steelbook. And this Halloween, you can be Leatherface TM too, with the officially licensed The Texas Chain Saw Massacre TM, Leatherface TM, costume, and adult and child sizes at your local Halloween store. We've been here a while. What time is it? I'm getting a phone call. Hello? Dinner tomorrow night? Sure, I don't have any plans. I'll see you there, Mr. Sawyer.